Hey, I'm Sam Peterson. Today we're talking with Hunter. Hunter is a sex educator, a writer, and a photographer, and also a gardener. If you don't want to hear us talking about gardening, skip to the 3 minute mark. Otherwise, I left it in because I think it delves nicely into Hunter's personality. Uh, this is why I live.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, hang on. I'm like doing several things at once. So,
Hi.
hey, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. I just got my house power washed. I feel
Nice.
very fresh.
I feel that I've been working on getting my garden organized. So, taking out a bunch of pots and planters and all that good stuff. I did a lot of that this
Hmm.
morning, and I'll be starting on sprouting some of the seeds and stuff later today. I'm a little
Oh,
behind.
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. What are you growing?
I have no idea yet. I have I have so many seeds that I saved from last year. I'm looking at them. That's why I'm looking over here.
uh,
Um, as well as like packets of stuff that I didn't get to last year.
mhm.
It's almost a problem.
Are you like a seed hoarder?
Kind of with the purpose of like using them all. So
Sure. Yeah.
yeah. So I grew a lot last year, and I got a
Hmm.
little too ambitious, I think. And between like getting seeds and then getting starter plants and stuff,
Hmm.
my garden was just exploding last year. So
That's awesome. Do you know
yeah.
Octavia Butler?
Mm-hmm.
I just brings to mind Parable of the Sower. I'm just thinking of like urban people amassing all these seeds, because we have to feed ourselves and it's the end
Yes.
times.
Hello, look what's happening. Like
Yeah,
that's
right,
exactly,
exactly.
yeah. That's I mean, I've been gardening since I was, gosh, a little kid. A lot of my family on my mom's side are Appalachian, like hill folk.
Okay.
So they were farmers, tobacco farmers, especially down in this region. And so growing up, I spent a lot of time with my elders. And
Hmm.
so I got to do a lot of gardening with them. At first, I thought it was boring, and I was like,
Yeah.
"This is like, why am I doing this?" And now I'm just like, "Oh, that's why."
Right. Sometimes I ponder when that flip is from like childhood to adult when things are boring and then things are like entrancing. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Yeah. Like,
yes,
when does that happen and what is that? Like, yeah, definitely with gardening. Hmm.
yeah. That definitely. It was just like a night and day switch. And I think it was like being able to take ownership is when I started finding um, that I was more interested in doing it because it was something that was mine and not something that was obligated to me.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I
That
think that that
makes,
also makes it, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course. Well, I'm really excited you're here today. I'm
Yeah,
sorry you're
thanks for
here
having me.
today because if you're here today, it means you've been through something or you have a story to tell. And I wish that upon no one. But sadly, the state of being human means, we've all incurred some trauma or tragedy or whatever. Yeah, but I,
Yeah,
I really admire your work. I think you're an amazing photographer. And
thank
I don't,
you.
do you identify as a photographer?
Amongst many other things, yeah.
I
Yeah,
know
it's
you're
one of my passions.
multi-talented. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've also been photographing for as long as I can remember. I got my first film camera when I was, I think, about 10 years old. That was all I wanted for my birthday.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Yeah.
mhm.
Nice. This is Hunter. And I know Hunter as a multifaceted artist. I've stand your pronouns. I haven't asked your pronouns.
They, them.
They, them. I've stand them on Facebook because their photography, as I mentioned earlier, is just beautiful. They have an impeccable aesthetic, and that's really all I know about you. So I'm excited to talk.
Yeah, and it's, it's funny that you mentioned that that's all you know about me, because I intentionally do that with keeping so much of myself protected.
Mm-hmm.
I think is a good way of saying it, not like hidden or mysterious. And it's not because I'm ashamed of who I am, but it's because I like to protect who I am, because, I think that that's been a major lesson for me as I've gotten older, is protecting my energy,
Mm-hmm.
and only allowing the people that like put in the effort and want to be a part of my life, to let those things come out. And sure, a lot of that does stem from trauma,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also something to be said for it when you're able to create those spaces, because once again, it's now in your ownership.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I want people in my life who nourish me and who elevate me, and
Yes,
that I do the same for. And it's incredible that you've come to that realization already, because
a lot of
it took me
therapy.
a I can relate, hard relate.
Yes, and yeah, I think it's what creates a lot of intimacy and a lot of ability for me to care about people in the way that I want to, when I'm
Mm-hmm.
able to like protect not only my space but them in my space.
Mm.
And I think
Mm-hmm.
that, especially as I've really, what's the word I want to think to, kind of like fit into and like kind of sunken into in a good way of what my queerness means to me, and like what those identities mean to me, is that I accept having all of these different variables about myself that are like juxtaposed against one another. So like I'm very maternal, but also like very protective and kind of like old grumpy grandpa kind of vibes. I mean, I run the gamut of when it comes to so many of these identities, that I think that for the people that do get to be a part of my close circle, that they see all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, it's kind of neat. And it's also allowed me to be able to be okay with those parts of myself.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I know for me with identities, it's like, what am I feeling in this moment? Who, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I know even within ourselves, like when we're looking to create ourselves and like to match what we feel inside, to demonstrate on the outside, um, at least in my experience, with trying to grow into and flourish in that identity, it took a long time to be comfortable with parts of myself more than others, of like embracing that some days I really love to be femme, and other days I like to be more of like central, of mask, and
Mm-hmm.
just like accepting and embracing that a lot of those different things that sometimes I really fought against are like what make me me, and that is why I'm in the that's why I'm that's what makes me me, and my identity and my queerness,
Mm-hmm.
and all of those other facets.
What was the pushback from, like, identity wise? Did you feel some pushback for like being more mask, or being
Yeah, so there's a number of things that can really be talked about with that, including, culturally.
yeah.
There's, I had a lot of pushback about, you shouldn't dress like that. You need to wear more dresses, or, um, if you would only take better care of your skin, you'd be able to get a man, or you need to act more ladylike. And I think it's those ways of like promoting violence within social norms and
Mm-hmm.
gender norms, which really made me very resistant and very against wanting to see what those things were like for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, those are little, I mean, those kind of aggressions um, were so powerful in my life, uh, truly wounding. So I totally connect with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also grew up going to a Catholic high school, not Catholic high school, Catholic grade school. And so I think that that's where some more of that trauma also kind of like worked itself into the fold of like very heteronormative, quite homophobic,
Wow.
likely racist,
Right.
because this was the Midwest.
Wow.
And I was maybe one of 5 people of color.
Wow.
At my school.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a very small environment. So I mean, like, you think about that and you're really trying so hard to like fit in, and it's terrifying. And you just really want to fit in wherever you can, because it's already the stakes are kind of against you.
Yeah. What was that like? Like, is that a source for you of some, I mean, that would be traumatic for me.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I've had to work on that a lot. That was why I was fortunate to be able to get out of that space, I think, before high school. But being in there, these are your formative years where you're starting to develop who you are within your peers and creating that identity. And as a loud, obnoxious, and I'm thinking of all the ways that I was described as, loud, obnoxious, like, fat, like opinionated girl. And those were the ways that I was identified as, and also as like being disobedient. It's,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And then once, they created those kinds of ways to describe who I was, I started to feel like, okay, maybe that's what I am. And then also being treated and also described as being stupid, and that I'll never get whatever project we were supposed to do. Like, it was always reinforced to me that I wasn't smart enough, or that I wasn't good enough to get it. So, when those are things that are like told to you,
racism,
you start to believe it. You really start to believe that. And I mean, this is, a child. I was a child at the time, and to be told those kinds of things, you start to believe it. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And I remember the first time that I made honor roll, it was like 5th grade, I think. And you could just tell that, even like, because the teacher stood in front of everybody in the class and was like announcing who made honor roll. And she was just like gritting her teeth when it came to announcing my name. And she said it last. And I guess it's because she just didn't want to say it.
Wow. That's so messed up.
Yeah.
What that must do to a child.
Yeah. And so it was funny. Yeah. And I mean, it was so funny at the time, because like ever since then, I've been on honor roll. Ever since then, I've been at like the top of my classes. And I think it was one of those things I had to prove to myself that, I am intelligent, and that I can do these things, and that I can understand these things. Maybe I learned differently. And even when I got into high school, I had an English teacher that, she saw a lot of potential in me in a way that like I didn't. And it allowed me to embrace not only being just like a total nerd, but also taught me ways that I could read better even. And that was the thing that I started thinking. I was like, maybe I just learned differently from people. And and like I said, it takes a lot of work to recondition yourself.
Yeah. Well, especially, as you say, when you're a child and you're receiving these messages. I mean, I was in a very small school. We wore uniforms, probably similar to Catholic school, I imagine. And, obviously the race thing wasn't an issue for me, but, I had a lot of pressure on me to perform. And what that did for me was made me smaller. It just made me smaller and smaller and smaller. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, even like, I just remembered, talking about uniforms, they always wanted to push me to wear the skirts and the jumpers. And I wanted to wear the polos and shorts and pants. And oh my gosh, the back and forth that even took. It was just like, they wanted me to be very, their idea of what is girliness and femininity, instead of just letting me be me.
I was lucky in that I got to wear my pants under my skirt. So I would literally like wear pants under my skirt. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you warm? Like, I mean, that kind of sounds like that would be toasty.
I must have been, but I had so much gender stuff going on. This is, in the
that's true.
60s, and for them to let me do that is pretty amazing. So
seriously.
Yeah, I'm sure I was hot, but whatever, I got to wear pants, you know what I mean?
Exactly. You're like, I'm going to take this victory and just like, I'm going to go with it.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think that says a lot, especially for queer youth, and trying to be just okay with who they are. And it's kind of funny because like now as an adult, I'm virtually running into so many of my peers from grade school and high school.
Oh, interesting.
They're like, oh yeah, we're queer too. And I'm like,
what?
Yes. It's funny. I'm like, okay, vibe attracts tribe, because these were people that I was friends with growing up. And I'm like, okay, there's something to be said for that like unwritten code, I guess, of just like we are around the people that we see ourselves in.
Definitely have that radar as a kid too, the safe people. Yeah.
Yes.
And that is so critical in protecting ourselves. I mean, so what was emerging from that? Would you say you were a moody child, or were you prone to depression, or how did that manifest?
I was a moody, depressed, anxious child. An overachiever and a perfectionist. Because I think that once I found out that I was good in something, that meant that I could have control or ownership over something. And so school and grades were a way that I could, keep control over and like maintain perfectionism with. And I think to a degree that it was unhealthy, to where if I got even if I got like a 91 out of 100, I would just be devastated with myself.
Right. It would crush you. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, I was diagnosed, I think, with like general anxiety disorder when I was like 10.
Oh, Hunter.
So yeah, those are just things that's like I've had to work within those spaces. And so I also recognize when I see anxiety in others, and I'm just like, I get it. That's okay. I think that it allows me to have more compassion for people that may be experiencing some of those things that I did or do feel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it does bring compassion, and it also manifests in so many different ways. Yeah. Everybody has their own like little twist on their anxiety. So you were 10, like what were your parents doing, or did you have parents, or what was happening?
So my parents lived on opposite sides of the country. They still do. Okay. But I lived with my mom, and I started going to like some support groups with like other youth that were around my age. Yeah, like I wanted to take that approach of talking through things and learning different ways to deal with anxiety.
That's so smart. I just did drugs.
I don't know. There's something about like, it just made me, because I was also kind of a sickly kid. I didn't want to take more medications.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I think that there was something that, and I've always, unless, I really have to, I always feel very apprehensive about taking more and more medications, simply because I'm just like, oh, this is going to make my stomach hurt, or I'm not going to feel good with this, or,
Oh, I worked at it.
I 100% believe that. And, those things, they take work. They take a lot of time.
Yeah. Yeah. And that, just being in my own skin was just so unbearable, it just
Hmm.
was. And being in the world was so unbearable. And it sounds like it was for you as well, like a lot of
Yeah,
pressure on you.
yeah, I think that um, I think the two people that I was closest to, they ended up passing away within about 6 months or so of each other. It was
How
my
old were you?
uh, 13.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it was my grandparents.
Oh,
And,
geez.
they were only in their 50s.
That's so
Um,
young.
but yeah, so the lessons that I did learn from them at an early age, I think have also still maintained a lot of validity for me, even as an adult. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, they were really just like the people that I looked up to. And I just felt, how, what is the word? Like an imprint, like
Yeah.
how certain people have an imprint on, like, say, a child when a child comes into the world. That was
Hmm.
these two people for me.
Oh, oh,
So it was
wow.
it was difficult to lose them.
No,
And
yeah,
that
no
kind of
doubt.
loss, you never get over that kind of loss. It just gets less painful.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
But they did a lot of, what's the word I'm thinking of? They did a lot to secure me into the type of person that could be resilient, but could
Hmm.
also take things in stride, even from a young age.
Oh, that's good because it sounds like you were getting a lot of shit from people. And
Uh,
yeah. And, I mean, so did they have like these conversations about race or class or whatever was happening?
uh,
Or was it more
in ways,
individual?
what, the support group or my grandparents?
Your grandparents.
They their focus was on me, I think,
Hmm.
more than anything else. And so
Hmm.
they brought things into perspective of me within the world, instead of just like focusing on like how racism is bad. It was like, this is how the world will, inevitably treat you, or you
Hmm.
are so much more than this, and here are the tools that you need. And
Hmm.
even when it came down to body image
Hmm.
and fat phobia that I received from everywhere else, they never saw that.
Oh,
They would
really?
they would reinforce and like encourage me, like, you are a beautiful human being. And so those
Hmm.
were things that I never heard.
Oh, wow. That's so great. That is so great.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
teaching me that there's like that, like I can have a great smile, or that, it's I have great calves. Like my grandma would always just be like, look at them calves. And I'm just like, thank
Wow.
you. I'm like, thank you, grandma.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah, like just being very individualized with like embracing who I am as a person, instead of
Hmm.
like this archetype within society, was really, I
Mm.
think, very meaningful.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, in my like 60s culture was very sort of binary and very like fat phobic. But my mother was very ambitious and smart and became the head of the Latin American department for the CIA. So I had this kind
That's
of
amazing.
feminist, isn't that amazing?
Oh my
Blows my
gosh.
mind. I had this very powerful example of feminism in action. So
And in the
in that
60s.
regard, yeah, yeah. And the fact that my father was just so cool with all that and they just had a great union, seeing that it was really inspiring and made me really push against the narrative about women that was so powerful and still is, even though
Absolutely.
like I'm trans, that
But
was
that's still something that
confusing.
you, yeah, that's still something that you're looking at, is like, this is what, and and I want to make sure I'm not putting words into your mouth, but like, and looking at how these things have shaped me and how I identify now, I still look at my past experiences like these are things that molded how I see the world. And
Yes.
like, those are your first impressions. And
Yes.
so who you are now is, I think there's also that little seed that's been like sprouted because of those early impressions. And it showed you that
Mm-hmm.
you can be powerful and that you can
Mm-hmm.
have that kind of strength and tenacity to develop into who you are.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely made me a very strong advocate for women's rights, but my mother was also terrifying and in her success and ambition. So again, I just sort of like, well, I'm miserable and I'm just gonna do drugs. But that apparently is not your story. So
Yeah,
do tell me more. So you're in high school, like you're how are you with the anxiety in high school? Like what's happening? And are you bringing in your creativity to sort of process this yet or?
yeah, so I started playing the clarinet when I was about
Oh,
5.
I love the clarinet.
Yeah, so I started playing, and then I got involved with band and marching band, and went into symphonic, and I was really like that was a big thing for me. Was I was musically inclined, and I had had so many years of like experience with it, and I think by the time I graduated, I'd had about 13 years of playing the clarinet.
Oh, wow.
And so I think that a lot of my anxiety manifested itself in like being engaged in school
Mm-hmm.
with like
Mm-hmm.
creative endeavors. So that's when I really started getting into like, say, darkroom developing.
Mm-hmm.
My school had a
Oh, I
darkroom
love
in
that.
it.
Love that.
And I got into silk screening and
Love it.
uh, let's see. That's when I really got involved with some, what is it? Kind of like student political things.
Oh, cool.
So I mean, like I was getting involved and finding myself within like what I could within the confines of school.
And
And
so
yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
no, you're good.
Your grandparents, and then they died. You're 13, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they passed. Like, what happened for you? Like, how did you process that? You were in school, you're a kid. Like, what
That
happened?
was oh gosh. So the additional component of that was that in that year alone, I think I was in 8th grade. In that year alone, I lost like 5 family members. All within, I think it was like maybe a 9-10 month time span. So there's a lot of times where I was out of school because, say, my grandparents passed and my great aunt passed and another, like it was a lot. So I think that I didn't process it at the time
Yeah.
because still trying to understand what death meant was different for me,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is a whole different story. Um, so I
Yeah.
avoided it a lot, and I just didn't process it for a long time.
Wow. Yeah, I imagine, I mean, death would mean something very different for me at 13 than it does for me at 61.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also, granted, I had lived in 2 haunted houses by that point. So
What? What?
I wish I was lying. I wish I was lying.
Oh my
So
God.
I lived in base housing, and there was definitely some very interesting paranormal activity
Oh,
in the
wow.
old housing. So you ever heard of the show Ghost Hunters?
Yeah.
They went to my hometown, to the military base.
Stop it.
They were there when I was there.
So it's like a documented haunted house.
Absolutely,
Dang.
yes. Like this is
Wow.
like, yeah. And they went to a couple different places, and they were like,
Mhm.
yeah, this was haunted. And I mean,
Dang.
even yes, I've been in buildings where I've seen like elevators go up and nobody is on it when it opens, and then you can hear footsteps and like a ball bouncing, because like the place that I was in was like, it used to be a tuberculosis ward for children.
Oh, many
So
ghosts.
there was that. But also the housing was old, and when a lot of it was built on stolen land.
Mhm.
And when you get that, there's going to be ancestors, and there's going to be spirits that are not
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah.
So a lot of things manifested.
Yeah.
And then after moving out of that house, I moved into another house that an older gentleman had just passed away in before we moved into it.
I've had haunted house experiences too, so I'm totally connecting with this. Like, that's wild.
Yes. And I lived in that house, gosh, about 8 years.
And he was around. How was that?
I didn't understand it at first, and then things started kind of clicking together. Like say for instance, this was some wild stuff. So I had a Rubik's Cube, and I was very adamant that I wanted to keep all the colors like as they were. I didn't want anything to like change it or whatever. So I had like this like built-in bookshelf on one of my walls in my bedroom. So I put it on like the top shelf, and I go to bed, and then the next morning I wake up and all the colors were jumbled. Like there was no colors that like matched one another on any side.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That stuff is powerful. I'm here to tell you.
Yeah. Did you ever hear about what is it? Furbies? Remember Furbies from the 90s? I had one that would like say words that weren't programmed for it. It was also on that bookshelf.
Oh, damn. Oh, damn. Wow. Was it scary, or were you like, okay, ghosts?
I think, I was scared at first. And then, because of having all those experiences by that point, I was just kind of like, and I think the most terrifying thing though was hearing a disembodied voice saying my name. And that was what was terrifying for me. And
that happens to me when I'm really anxious. Does that happen to you? Has that ever happened to you? That happens to me when I'm really anxious sometimes. I have to be super anxious.
Yeah, like it's like you're on super heightened alert. And this was actually before I was going to bed. I was about to fall asleep, and it happened.
That's wild.
And for the life of me, like, and it sounded like my mom's voice. But here's the kicker: my mom was at work.
Right. Yeah.
I was just saying, I think that the spirit was like, it was a father figure. And so I think that it manifested itself and would kind of like show itself around me, especially because it was watching after me, because I, was a child to a single parent who worked a lot. And I think that it was just its way of saying like, oh, hey, somebody's actually watching you. Like, you're still being babysat.
That's really sweet.
Yeah.
I mean, the experience I had was with a benign ghost presence, whatever, but it still terrified me. It was still like, what?
The one from the first house was definitely more of the malicious type. So I think the last straw was my mom and I had gone out of town to visit family. And it was just like a holiday weekend. And when we came back, the house, it was a 2-story like townhouse and base housing, was covered top to bottom in birds.
In birds?
Yes, like the birds had just like literally every inch of this house had a bird in it.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And we tried to open up doors and windows and get them out. They weren't moving.
Like oh my God. That's like out of a movie. Seriously. That's cinematic.
Yeah. It was terrifying. And my mom was just like, huh. Like, that voiceover is like, you do not have to worry about me. That was my mom.
She was rolling with it then.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It took maintenance a couple hours to get everything out.
That's so wild. This stuff really happens though.
Yeah, it does.
It really happens. Whatever.
And in Ohio, there's actually like books on this called like Haunted Ohio and some other stuff, because there's just so many things in different parts of Ohio that are very saturated with paranormal activity and like portals and stuff. And then that's also where I think I keep some of myself on lock too, because I'm just like, people are going to think that this is wild if I start talking about ghosts and like Yeah. I think it's like, unless you've lived through it, you know, or that you're very accepting of hearing about it, that a lot of people may look at you differently.
Yes, indeed. But you know, I was raised by atheist skeptics. I have
Okay.
fully, I'm very skeptical and very
I feel like you'd be
anal-
very calculated about some of those things, like trying to find a way to like describe it as like, oh, this was just like the pipes banging against something. Like you want to debunk things.
yeah, no, I was raised that way, but I fully accept that there are experiences we can't account for. And when I
Yeah.
was in the haunted house, it also was a documented haunted house. Like, and what happened to me was fully within the realm of what had already been documented. And I didn't even know that before it happened. So
Yeah.
I'm a believer. Like, it
Yeah.
happens. It's for real. Yeah.
It is. And I know that sometimes it has to take an experience like that of something that you can't describe otherwise for
Mm-hmm.
people to be like, oh, okay, yeah, I think I'm believe this now. But I think from all of those experiences, because it did set up a way for me to also accept death in a way that is like, you know, there's still things that go on after you stop existing here. So I
Yeah.
think that that's also why my interpretation of death and my grandparents and some of my elders passing,
Mm-hmm.
I processed it differently, because like it's just now I just, you know, they're not here, but they're
Mm-hmm.
still somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so yeah. Um,
So you have the sense that they're here,
mhm.
or they're somewhere. So yeah. Okay. So was that
Yeah.
soothing for you? Was that?
Yeah, it's soothing, and it, you know, it comforts me in a way of just like um you can choose your path even after you've, you know, passed from this plane.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's comfort in that. And I know that the interpretation of life and death and living um can be different for everyone. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think for me that that's my interpretation of it. And so it's also kind of funny just the way that like um there's this odd phenomenon that happens to me a lot, and people have witnessed it, where lights will just turn on, like without any provocation.
Hunter.
Um, and it happens to me a lot, where I'll
Wow.
be standing next to a light and it'll just go on, like it'll just turn on. Um, and this has happened at friends' houses. This happened
Mm-hmm.
here. This has happened
Mm-hmm.
like even with like street lights. Like one random street light will just turn on like right as I'm underneath it.
Really?
Yeah.
Have you had a psychic work with you, or I'm getting off track? That's
No,
another.
it's, I mean, I think that this is all part of like who I am.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. It's a just, I think probably my energetic presence. Um, it's kind of like being a lighthouse.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I don't know how to explain it other than it's just like when, say, maybe you're a lighthouse for energy, and when it
Mm-hmm.
comes around, it just kind of like, you know, makes certain things kind of like go on and off, or
Mm-hmm.
you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of funny because it's like I think, you know, there was something I saw. It was like a ghost movie where like a ghost realizes that a person can see them, and they're just like, "You can see me." So yeah, I think that there's just something to be said for people that maybe if they have like certain experiences, like maybe you and I have had,
Mm-hmm.
where that reflects something in their aura for later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I did some really intense work with a seer in Austin, and then yeah, studied Reiki, and yeah, so I definitely am
Yeah,
in that arena. So
yeah,
it makes me come back to like grief and loss.
mm-hmm.
So you're sort of dealing with that grief and loss, but you have, it sounds like, a very strong sense of, I'm going to say spirituality, but whatever word is appropriate, maybe that's not appropriate, but
I think that that's, yeah, that's definitely appropriate for this.
okay.
Uh, yeah, I think it was something for me that I developed on my own from experience of like that's what helped me to process what loss meant like. And so while it made me sad, and it still makes me sad some days where I'm just like, I really miss my grandparents.
Yeah.
I think that there's also the way that I was able to process that, to be like, I have so many great memories with them. I actually have a hat from both of them that I keep with me.
Do
So,
you? What kind of
yeah,
hat
I
is
like
it?
having, one is my grandpa's fedora, and then the other one is like a yellow hat, with like a navy blue ribbon around the band of it. But I
I love
think
that.
having that physical reminder is also something for me that's like a very important component or remnant of them that keeps them connected to me.
That's fantastic. I mean, in all these conversations that I've been having with people, one of the common themes seems to be the loss of somebody, really close to us.
Yeah.
And for me, the people that I've lost that have been impactful, I have like a stick my friend gave to me, like the he gave me a bunch of knives too, and I eventually got rid of them, but I have this stick. So like different things become very important. They're imbued with their spirit, and it helped me grieve, it helped
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. And I think when we grieve with our whole body and all of our senses.
Ooh,
And
tell me about that. What does that mean?
um so yeah, like having that tactile reminder,
Mm-hmm.
or say one of my great uncles, from my dad's side, he passed away a couple of years ago. I was very close to him, and I hadn't met him very long before he passed away, but kindred spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a voicemail from him that I still keep. Um,
I
yeah.
have a voicemail too from a friend who died. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I
Yeah.
think that we grieve with our whole body in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you might have something that reminds you of how they smelled,
Mm-hmm.
or of a certain smell that reminds you of them. Like
Mm-hmm.
uh, there's Milka chocolate, like the brand Milka, that
Mm-hmm.
reminds me of my great uncle. And so, because like one of my first memories with him was when I was learning about my dad's side of the family, because I was very disconnected from them, was that we sat at his kitchen table in Los Angeles, and it was like a hot summer day. And he had all these pictures just spread out through the table. And he had taken some pink lemons from his backyard and made us lemonade and like Milka chocolate, and we just sat there for hours while he told me like all these like wild like origin stories of our family.
Oh,
And
wow.
so
That sounds amazing.
yeah. And he unfortunately passed away due to the effects of Agent Orange, because he
Oh,
was on.
God.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
and there you were with this. You said it, like tactile and sensory, olfactory and visual. Like, yeah, okay, all right,
Yeah. So that's what I think, like, and even when you grieve with your whole body and all of your senses, they come in different waves.
yeah.
And so, they can be triggered by different things, of like when I do see that chocolate bar, or when I see pink lemons or something. Those are things
Mm-hmm.
that very much remind me of this person.
Mm-hmm.
And with my grandparents, Thanksgiving that was their holiday, and Easter was a close second. So I
Yeah.
still honor those two things. And even though I don't, the meaning behind Thanksgiving isn't one that I practice or recognize.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do like to make food to share with others. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
a thing where it's a ritual for me of like some of the things that I do from gardening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like I will harvest the sweet potatoes from my garden,
Yeah.
and I'll be having all these things like green beans and stuff that I grew, and that's part of the meal.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, like
Yeah.
for Thanksgiving this past year, gosh, I think I made like 9 different things.
Oh, God, that's amazing. I mean, there's nothing wrong with gratitude and
Yeah.
loving one's friends. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I think of it as a way, as well as like New Year's, um, to pay a sort of tribute to them. while also like feeding other queer people.
And we need to be fed.
Yes, listen, I think that that's definitely one way that I get into, that's how I'm a mama bear or mama bird so much, is because I will feed you. I may not have a lot, but what I have, you will get fed.
So it sounds like community is very important to you.
Yeah, and even how community has represented itself to me, say in my teens and my 20s and now in my 30s. I think the way that that shows up for me has even changed throughout time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and by that, like, I think for me, community as a teenager was to be around the people that I think will make me look cool. And then in my 20s, community and being around others was transactional. Such as like, yeah. And, you know,
I didn't mean to cut you off. Please say more.
No, you're okay. This is us having a conversation. This happens. By transactional, I mean, like, what is in it for each other?
Yeah.
Are we hanging out because this is a thing that, like, there's an end goal? Is there, you know,
is sex
some
going to
way
be involved?
Yeah, and even if it's not sex, is it like, are we here to go to this place and that be the thing of it? Or, you know, so yeah, that's what I mean by like transactional, is that there's always some goal to be met. It was always a means to an end.
Gotcha.
Of being in community. And then I think as I started to reach into the latter part of my 20s and then approaching, you know, 30 and on, I realized that community for me meant having each other's backs and also harnessing and creating that environment that, you know, I wish I had for myself, and wishing like what I had, you know, from others. I really try to emulate that for my community now. And also a lot of that is just the interpretation of community for me now is like a lot of giving and thinking of what I wish I could have had.
So what did you miss in community that you are giving now that is meaningful to you?
Being a queer elder for me is definitely something that like I really aspire to, because one, you know, for being Black, like frequently the life expectancy is not always as like equitable.
Yeah.
And so growing into those archetypes of like the people that I loved most in my life, like, you know, my Black aunties and my grandparents, and what were the lessons that they taught me, and also just being, you know, true to themselves and giving that wisdom, and like, you know, giving food to people or creating a space where it's just like, you can be yourself. I may not like fully like the decision that you made, but I'm gonna tell you, if you like it, I love it. So I think it's just, what I wanted was to be fully and completely and wholly accepted.
Yeah.
And allowed that autonomy to sometimes make not so good decisions, but to always be like, look, I'll take care of you when you come back.
Right. Go do, be. Yeah. And I'm still here. Yeah.
Yes. But also being respectful of your own space and your own capacity within that.
Absolutely.
And,
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that that's sometimes hard for us, and especially as queer folk and folk who have gone through trauma, because, you know, to be queer, like I heard this recently and I was just like, wow, to be in those identities means you probably have experienced some trauma.
Yes.
And I thought that was just like a very beautiful, it you know, it hit a lot of points for me.
It's hard sometimes to be in community and to be an elder and to be supportive of everybody, because there is so much trauma, and you know, people have a lot going on, and I sometimes have to be like really pull myself back and go, that is a suffering person. That person is suffering. And that really like reframes it for me. Like, oh, they're not just an asshole or whatever it is I'm thinking in the moment, you know?
I mean, it's so easy for us to jump to a lot of conclusions.
Yeah. Even
And I
then
think,
when,
yeah, you want to protect yourself in that. And
yes.
yeah, and I think that that's what makes it easy to jump to conclusions. But what I've learned is to take a step back, and especially in times where I'm feeling very frustrated or upset,
Mm-hmm.
I will articulate to people like, look, I need a minute um, to just like process these things on my own, which I think it's a very healthy way of expressing a boundary.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it takes a long time for some of us to learn that. So it's great that you know that. Some people
Trust
never
me, it's
learn
taken a
that,
long
Hunter.
time.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it took me a long time as well. And I had to just like realize that I couldn't have these destructive relationships with people and ultimately myself anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's how you end up with a lot of regrets, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think to wrap that all back up in a nice bow of I just wanted to, and I still do, I try to create that space of like who I wish I had
Mm-hmm.
or components of people that I did have in my life to be that person for others, and especially in community. So it doesn't have to be transactional. It doesn't have to be like we're here in this time for this amount of time to do this thing, and that's the expectation. Really shape the way that you are and how you see others, and also how you decide to spend your time, however much of it that you
Yes.
do have.
Yes. Because there is so much need out there, and because so much many of us are like mama bears, we need to be able to, resource ourselves carefully
Mm-hmm.
and take care of one another in ways that are healthy for ourselves. So it sounds like through all this grief and trauma and death and loss, you have really come out like with this powerful, beautiful being who is now, placed to be an elder for their community. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I never thought that I would be in a space of even where like I felt comfortable identifying as an elder queer, and I think there's some components of think of ageism that queerness has had in the past where I feel like we age ourselves significantly as like because I think there's a push for youthfulness.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
I do understand that now that as I am older,
Mm-hmm.
nobody is old unless they treat themselves that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just think of it as being like an elder queer is like having lived experiences that I hope can help others.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I can say as someone, I'm 61 and
Mm-hmm.
I've lived through some stuff. And for me, I'm an elder in a lot of ways, but I learn from young people all the time. And that's been really exciting because things are changing and it's wonderful. It truly is. It's great to see.
Yeah. And, it's also really rewarding to be able to think about that as like, I'm glad somebody doesn't have to do or experience the things that I did because now there's a lot more people that are much more vocal about, resisting that.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the same way that now um, there's fat phobia, but there's also this wave of people that are like, no, 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 no.
Uh-huh.
We accept and we embrace and like we see the beauty and the power in all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot more presence and visibility as say opposed to growing up in the 90s and early 2000s where there was a lot of that like public reinforcement of like body image being to take up as little space as possible.
Yeah, yeah. Anorexia. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that was endemic in the 90s and the 2000s. Truly.
Yeah, and even the way that that interacts with this idea of femininity, of like
Yes.
reducing your presence physically, emotionally, even commercially, as
Mm,
like this is what sells because this is what you should aspire to, and then all the things that
mhm.
come from that, including like diet, diet culture that comes from those things. So
I know, and we could go on about that. But we've already covered ghosts and and gardens and so many things. I'm so excited to have finally had a chance to talk with you, Hunter.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate you taking your time out with me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Is there anything that you want to leave the people with, or?
Not what can I get out of it, but what am I putting into this? And yeah. And also just going back to that message of like the way that we grieve is also the way that we celebrate with our whole bodies and all of our senses.
I love it. Thank you so much. That is a gem.
My mom was not in the house when it happened.
Stupid ghost.
Yeah.